Hi, everybody. Here's Peter Larson, and I'm with the Ottawa Forum Israel-Palestine, Canada Talks Israel-Palestine, and I'm thrilled today to be having a short chat with Farida Deif, who is Canada's director at Human Watch Canada. So welcome, Farida.
Thanks so much. Great to be here.
Farida, I want to talk to you about this recent report, sort of bombshell report by Human Rights Watch, which it calls a turning point or an inflection point. But before I get into that, you just explain to us the relationship between Human Rights Watch Canada and Human Rights Watch International, I guess, or the international body. What's your relationship to them?
Right. Well, I mean, for our charitable status here in Canada, we have a separate Human Rights Watch entity that's registered as a charity under Canadian charity laws. But in terms of the organization, the way that we're structured, there's one Human Rights Watch. We speak in one voice. There's no position that Human Rights Watch Canada takes that's different from the position of Human Rights Watch writ large. And so it's one entity. We're quite different from other organizations that are more perhaps membership based, that have separate chapters, et cetera, separate sections. For our charitable status, we're registered in Canada as an entity, but certainly in terms of our voice, our work, our position, it is all, one entity, which is Human Rights Watch.
Oh, okay. And your role in Canada is to focus attention on human rights abuses in Canada, or to bring Canadians and the Canadian government's attention to human rights abuses around the world?
We do both in Canada. So the focus of my role as sort of advocacy director in Canada is really to look at Canada's foreign policy and to engage Ottawa on a range of our research and findings, primarily in conflict and crisis settings. But we also do work here in Canada looking at abuses, everything from abuses in First Nations communities, abuses in immigration detention. So that's also kind of part of our portfolio.
Okay, thank you. So now I want to turn my attention, if you don't mind, to this report, which has just come out about, I'm now speaking on the 3rd of May, so it came out about a week ago. It brought some very serious charges against Israel. And I wanted to ask you, what has been the response of the Canadian government and the Canadian media to this report?
Right. Well, I mean, just to give you, to go back a little bit, to give you a bit of background, we, prior to the release of this report, we sent a letter to Foreign Minister Garneau with the findings of the report, asking the government to engage seriously with the findings, with our recommendations. We also had a briefing with Global Affairs Canada around the report and its finding, again, making a similar call for, Canada to, review the report, review the very serious crimes that we've documented in the report that are crimes under, the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, crimes under the Apartheid Convention, and then to really kind of look at our recommendations, which are also very much for countries like Canada to take on board. And so, that we only had one initial meeting with Global Affairs around the report. One of we welcomed that meeting, certainly, and just, speaking about our report and our findings. But I think one of the obstacles that we face in engaging the Canadian government seriously around this report and our findings is, Canada's longstanding position has been that, the government supports a just and lasting peace in the Middle East, a two-state solution, and does not recognize a Palestinian state unless that's going to be negotiated by the parties. And so that's been Canada's kind of long-standing position, not only by this government, but successive governments. The problem here really, is that the notion that this occupation, this 50+ year occupation is temporary is false. And the notion that a peace process will somehow miraculously solve, the situation on the ground is also incorrect. And so what we've been asking the Canadian government to do is really, look at the reality on the ground. This is the reality on the ground is one in which, the Israeli government is, has an intent to dominate, and an intent for Jewish Israelis as well to, the reality on the ground is a reality of apartheid. It's a reality in which the Israeli government is, privileging Jewish Israelis and systematically discriminating against Palestinians across, the territory in which, the Israeli government has authority. And so for us, what we've been urging the Canadian government to do is to engage with that reality, to not have a longstanding position that is divorced from that reality, because there's no, there's nothing to applaud in a longstanding position that is divorced from the reality on the ground. Surely the Canadian government needs to consistently, review its position, monitor the situation on the ground, and come to different positions if findings emerge that require it to do so. And so, this government has been a champion of a rule-based international order. Certainly Canada is a founding member of the International Criminal Court. And here we're talking about very serious international crimes. And so we've asked Canada to engage with our findings. We've also asked Canada to support an investigation of these crimes at the International Criminal Court. But a huge obstacle that we face again and again is Canada's position that, there is no state of Palestine. And so the Rome Statute, it doesn't apply here. And, Palestinians have no recourse at the International Criminal Court. So that's been quite challenging in terms of our engagement with the Canadian government, since it's hard to know then, if the International Criminal Court is then, according to the government, not the right place for Palestinians to, basically, present their grievances. Where then can they do so? Where then can Palestinians who have suffered grave international crimes that are crimes under international law find remedy for those crimes, if not a criminal court?
But the Human Rights Report, Human Rights Watch report, doesn't really hang on whether or not Palestine is a state. I mean, the human rights abuses either are or are not taking place, and I don't understand how the Canadian government would say that because Palestine is not a state that we're going to ignore these human rights violations.
Well,
you must have asked them that, and they must have told you an answer of some sort.
Well, I mean, I think unfortunately the answer is often that, this is Canada's longstanding position. And so unfortunately, it's a longstanding position that's divorced from reality. And it's also a longstanding position that allows the government to bury its head in the sand with respect to human rights abuse in Palestine. It allows them to turn a blind eye to those abuses. And the fallback is always, well, this is our longstanding position. And unfortunately, that's deeply troubling to many people around the world, including certainly Palestinians who suffer from these abuses.
Right. And this blog has frequently noticed what Canada's official position is on our GAC website, and what we do is often quite different as well. That we say that we're in favor of certain things, but in fact, often our actions don't follow what our words are. Just before you go, I want you to tell us if Canadians want to support the work of Human Rights Watch Canada. Do you accept money?
Yeah, so we, Human Rights Watch is an independent international human rights organization, so we accept no government funds. And so we rely entirely on the generosity of individual supporters and, foundations, et cetera, private philanthropists to support Human Rights Watch. And so certainly, yes, I mean, that's something that we do fundraise here in Canada for our work and to support our research, including research on Israel, Palestine, and elsewhere.
I will, sorry.
Sorry, I also recognize that I didn't answer your question about the media.
Yes, okay, yeah, for response to the media. Yes.
Well, yeah, I mean, so, there was a couple of strong articles that we saw on in the Canadian press. Newswire, as well as the Globe and Mail, did a long kind of piece. We were quite disappointed, though, that the CBC, no aspect of the CBC, radio, TV, etc., online content covered this report at all. It was radio silence by the CBC, which was quite unfortunate. But I think it speaks to, unfortunately, the kind of media climate around Israel-Palestine and the often, environment of kind of muzzling any criticism of Israeli human rights abuses.
Right.
Certainly, groups that are sort of watchdogs around reviewing any kind of content that might be, that might be seen as critical of Israel, I think in a way, unfortunately, has had an effect on Canadian media outlets and whether or not they want to engage on, around any issue that might offend those groups. And so that's what we've seen in the media landscape. But I'm hopeful, we've partnered in Canada with a number of organizations, Independent Jewish Voices, Canadians for Peace and Justice in the Middle East. We've worked with them around this report, and it's clear that there's efforts underway to engage the Canadian public, because I think in many ways, the Canadian public is far ahead of the Canadian government on this issue. We've seen polls that have shown that Canadians are deeply troubled by what's happening, in Israel-Palestine. And so we're hoping that the kind of public conversation is, that this report creates is one that will allow the government and push the government to move further on and to really adopt the very concrete recommendations we make. I mean, we make a series of recommendations in the report that are very relevant to Canada. Canada is one of a few countries that has a targeted sanctions mechanism that, imposes travel bans and asset freezes on human rights abusers. So we've called on this government in the report to impose targeted sanctions on Israeli government officials who are implicated in the crimes of apartheid and persecution. We've also, certainly the crime of apartheid and persecution needs to be recognized for what it is. And so we're asking for recognition of the crime in a statement and support multilaterally for a UN Commission of Inquiry, a global envoy for the crimes of apartheid and persecution, as well as, conditioning arms sales and military security assistance between Canada and Israel to the Israeli government taking steps to end those crimes, and, vetting any agreements and engagement with Israel to screen for any activities that are directly contributing to apartheid and persecution. Because it's clear that Canadians and the Canadian government shouldn't be complicit in these crimes.
Right.
So there needs to be monitoring to ensure that doesn't happen.
Well, Farida, I think that the report by Human Rights Watch is one more contribution, along with the B'Tselem report that came out a month ago with the determination by the International Criminal Court. I think you're making a contribution to raising public awareness on these issues, and good luck to you at Human Rights Watch Canada.
Thank you so much.